A couple of years ago, I read a book that was really good. I think some of you might have read it too. It's called Braiding Sweetgrass. Has anyone else read Braiding? Oh, I knew I'd see a lot of hands for that one. Well, one of the things that struck me in the story, and I think that fits well today, is she told the story. Now, you understand the author here is a Native American woman and at the same time a biologist. That's why the book is so fascinating. But in the book, she tells the story of the Iroquois mythology of their creation story. And I'm going to share that with you now. It's called Sky Woman Falling. Long ago, the earth was covered with water. Geese, turtles, otters, swans, and fish of every kind lived in harmony. One night, they looked to the sky, and they saw something unexpected. A woman falling, clutching a small bundle. The geese took flight, knowing that this sky woman was not made for the sea. They caught her on their wings before she could crash into the water. But they could not carry her for long. An old turtle surfaced and offered his shell for her to rest on. Seeing that she needed land, the animals held a council and decided to bring her mud from the bottom of the water. One by one, the deep divers tried, the loon, the otter, the beaver, but the water was too deep. Some did not return. Finally, only the muskrat was left. He was the smallest and weakest among them, but he bravely dove. He was gone a long time, but eventually his limp, still body floated to the surface, clutching a small clump of mud in his paw. Sky Woman took the mud reverently and spread it gently on the back of the turtle. Moved by the courage and the generosity of these creatures, she began to dance in gratitude. With each step, the mud spread and grew, first into an island and then into the great lands of the earth. From her bundle, she planted the tree of life. And from its roots came grasses, herbs, fruits, trees, enough for all beings to flourish. Today on this Creation Justice Sunday, this myth articulates the reality of the interdependence of all things. And as and this is an important concept for us to remember as we listen to our gospel lesson for this morning. So I invite you once again to hear the parable of the wise builder.
This message today is from Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 through 27. Everybody who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise builder who built a house on bedrock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the wind blew and beat against that house. It didn't fall because it was firmly set on bedrock. But everybody who hears these words of mine and doesn't put them into practice will be like a fool who builds his house on sand. The rain fell, the floods came, and the wind blew and beat against that house. It fell and was completely destroyed.
This is a pretty straightforward parable, isn't it? It's a comparison between the wise and the foolish builders. There are those who root their lives in something enduring, and those who construct fragile wishes on shifting sands. The rain fell, and the floods came, and the wind blew and beat against that house, and yet the house built on solid rock stood firm. Like I said, pretty straightforward. When we ground our lives and our faith on the solid firmament, we're anchored, steady. But while this parable does offer us a simple lesson, it also invites us to go deeper. You see, for Jesus, building on a solid footing is more than just hearing the parables. It's about living them out, weaving them into our choices, sharing them with our communities, and adding them to the very architecture of our care for creation. You see, we finally cannot separate the strength of the house from the ground beneath. The foundation and the structure are one continuous living system. And so it is with all of God's creation. The natural world, the flora and the fauna, the ecosystems, and everything living in it. All of these things are intrinsically interdependent. That's the bedrock upon which the earth was built. The rain fell, and the flood came, and the wind blew and beat against the house, and it didn't fall because it was firmly set on the bedrock. But long before these words echoed across the Galilean hills, another story was told under different stars. It's the story that I shared earlier, the story of Sky Woman, who fell through a hole in the heavens and came to rest on the wings of geese, finally finding a home on the back of a great turtle. And the world grew, and the animals and the plants collaborated, each giving what they could so that life might flourish. Isn't this the foundation of our story as well? The foundation of all creation stories? Because Sky Woman didn't build alone. She depended on the humility of the animals, the willingness of creation to work together, the generosity of the mud that was brought up from the depths, and the sacrifice that was made as that mud came up from the bottom of the sea. Every creature, every element, every gesture mattered. And the earth, this turtle land, was born not out of dominance, but interdependence. Not from isolation, but from a shared hope. Now I have to wonder what it would mean to build our house, our lives, our churches, our society on this same kind of bedrock. On the recognition that we do not, that we cannot do it alone. That the well-being of my neighbor, the well-being of the hawk, of the tree, the well-being of the child who lives on the other side of the world, the well-being of the immigrant hoping for a better life, that their fate is bound up with my own fate. Now, we as people of faith, we find Jesus calling us to this same kind of deeper wisdom, not just as individuals, but as participants in the whole, like threads in the tapestry of God's creation. You see, to care for creation is not a sidebar to our faith. It's a foundational part of it. But this divine calling also comes to us from a most unexpected place. In his famous book on the origin of species, Charles Darwin, when reflecting on the evolutionary connections that he saw between all living things, said the following: "There is grandeur in this view of life. Having been originally breathed into existence by the Creator." Originally breathed into existence by the Creator. You see, for Darwin, the evolutionary process, the process that connected all living things, was in the end divinely ordained. Now, this reality gets lost sometimes when we have this debate between faith and science. But when we move past a literalist interpretation of Genesis, we find a strong evolutionary undercurrent and understanding in this interconnectedness of all things. I invite you to read Psalm 104 sometime. It is the oldest account of creation in the Bible. But anyway, as we reflect on Darwin's insights into the web of being, and as we do this, I think it's important for us to remember that our evolution as human beings is not just physical, but it's also spiritual. We're called to grow spiritually towards a greater love, a greater awareness, a greater sense of sharing and caring with one another. But for the earth, we have to care also, the earth that sustains all of us. Which brings us back around to our text for today. Darwin's thoughts and the myth of Sky Woman both lead us back to Jesus' parable. Because the house in this story doesn't stand alone on a plane. It's part of a wider landscape, a landscape that's shaped by the rain and by the wind and by the unseen soil beneath. And when we're invited by this parable to notice, to honor, and to participate in this intricate web, a web of being where every act of justice, every kind word, a web where care for creation, all of these things are a way of fortifying the whole. We can't have our life without that life over there. And that life over there is dependent upon all life. Now, this is Creation Justice Sunday, and I would be remiss if I did not read a poem to you today from Mary Oliver. This poem is called What Can I Say by Mary Oliver. What can I say that I have not said before? So I'll say it again. The leaf has a song in it. The stone is the face of patience. Inside the river, there is an unfinished story, and you are somewhere in it. And it will never end until all ends. So take your busy heart to the art museum, to the Chamber of Commerce, but take it also to the forest. The song you heard singing in the leaf when you were a child is singing still. I am of years lived so far 74, and the leaf is still singing. My friends, let us become wise builders. Let us be gentle with the earth, generous to one another and to all people. And let us be attentive to the sacred songs that are still singing in the leaves. And let us participate in the great story of creation, a story that's still being written inside the river and by wind and root, by hope, by community, by the very hand of God. Amen. And the people of God said,
Amen.
I would